I want you to imagine a morning. You wake up. Look around the familiar room. Everything's still there, the old chair, the wedding photo, the window catching the first light of day. But something feels different, an emptiness, as if the world is still intact, but you're no longer in the right place. You look in the mirror, and for a moment you're not sure who's looking back. Many people come to me in exactly that state. They say, I don't know who I am anymore. The job that used to make me proud doesn't mean anything now. The relationships closest to me suddenly feel distant. I feel like I'm coming apart. And I usually smile, not because I take their pain lightly, but because I understand this is the moment when freedom begins to take shape. It sounds paradoxical, doesn't it? When life falls apart, we think we're losing everything. But in truth, it's only the false self that's dissolving the shell we've carried for decades in order to be accepted, to be loved, to be safe. We thought we were that shell. We invested everything into it. But deep inside, there's always been a small part of the soul whispering, "This isn't me." I once met a man 58 named Thomas. All his life, he had been a successful businessman, a model husband, a devoted father. But when he retired, he told me, "It's like I've been stripped bare. No more meetings, no one needs me, no goals left to chase." He sat in his empty office feeling meaningless, and then he broke down. Not because he'd lost his job, but because he realized he had never known how to live without a role to play. I told him, "Thomas, maybe this isn't an ending. Maybe it's a beginning, not the start of a new career, but the beginning of you." He went quiet. A few months later, he came back and said he'd started spending his mornings painting. Not for money, not for anyone, just because it made him feel lighter. And he smiled a smile I'd never seen on that man's face before. You see, the breakdown isn't a disaster. It's how life clears space so the truth of you can be born. Like a snake shedding old skin in order to grow uncomfortable, yes, but natural and unavoidable. The ego, the me built of titles, achievements, roles, and beliefs has to collapse so the real can breathe. I once read a study on the human brain when we change habits or undergo a deep shift in perception. Old neural connections weaken to make room for new networks. Nature renews itself by breaking down the old to bring forth the new. The soul is the same. You cannot carry old illusions into truth. They have to dissolve, and that process is what you're calling a collapse. I know how much it hurts. When you lose the old meanings, it's like falling off the map. You no longer know who you are or where to go. But remember this, when the old map burns, that's when you can finally see the sky. Ask yourself, is it possible that what you're losing was never truly yours? Is it possible that the emptiness you feel is actually a doorway into what's truly precious? Because sometimes only after losing everything we thought we were do we finally touch what we truly are. To me, that's the most beautiful part of awakening. It's not about finding a new meaning. It's about realizing you don't need any meaning in order to live. You don't need to become anyone. You just stop, breathe, and allow what's old in you to fall away. Because only when the I dissolves does freedom begin to breathe. Not freedom to do anything you want, but freedom from the fear of having to be somebody. It's freedom in the form of dissolution, quiet, unflashy, but so deep you can never go back. And if you're in that season right now, don't panic. Let it happen. Sometimes in the very midst of the breaking life is handing you a gift you never dared to accept, the freedom to be yourself whole, without the shell, without the role, without pretense. You haven't lost anything. You've only just begun to be born again. I want you to imagine this. It's a long night. You lie in your familiar room, everything around you is quiet, yet inside nothing feels calm. You can't sleep. Can't think, can't find meaning in anything anymore. The things that once gave you certainty, your work, your family, your faith, even the very idea of who you are have vanished like smoke. You look around and feel a haunting emptiness. If you've ever been through that, you know what I'm talking about, the dark night of the soul. Over more than 30 years of working with people on the spiritual path, I've seen this phase appear again and again. For the young, it often comes as a crisis of meaning. For those in their 50s or 60s, it arrives after loss, the death of a loved one, retirement, or simply one morning when you wake up and realize, I've lived an entire life, but I'm not sure I've ever truly lived. I've heard countless people at that age say to me, I don't know who I am anymore. And I always tell them, good. Because when you no longer know who you are, that's when life finally gets a chance to speak to you. You see, the dark night of the soul isn't truly empty. It's the silence before dawn. When the sun is about to rise, the sky is always darkest. And in that darkness, all the artificial lights, the lights of success, of self-image, of control go out. Only then can we begin to see the real light, not from outside, but from within. I remember a woman named Eleanor, 64 years old, who came to me after a year of deep depression. She said, I don't feel joy in anything anymore. I pray, I read, I meditate, but all I feel is this giant void. I looked at her and said, maybe that void is the gift you've been seeking. She gave a sad smile. A gift? It feels like I'm dying, I replied. Yes, the part of you that's dying is the part that caused all your suffering. This dark night isn't here to destroy you. It's here to return you to yourself. Many people mistake the dark night of the soul for a problem, a flaw in the awakening process. But it isn't. It's essential. Like a seed buried in the ground before it sprouts, without darkness, there can be no dawn. Without dissolution, there can be no rebirth. Even psychology today confirms this. When you go through such a breakdown, your brain is actually reorganizing itself. The areas tied to ego, identity, control, and self-image temporarily quiet down so that a deeper part of your consciousness can emerge. Science calls it neural reorganization. Mystics call it awakening through surrender. Different names. Same truth. Darkness isn't your enemy. It's the womb of light. I know it's easy to say, harder to live, because in that darkness you will feel abandoned, no belief to cling to, no God or Buddha answering your prayers. Everything goes silent. But do you know what happens in that silence? The infinite begins to speak. Not through words, not through images, but through pure presence. You start to notice something quietly, watching, breathing, witnessing, and it's not afraid. That's who you really are. I often tell my students, if you find yourself in darkness, don't rush to switch on a light. Just sit still and open your eyes. Little by little, you'll see it was never completely dark, because when the mind finally stops struggling, when you stop trying to escape, the light finds its own way in. Not a light that comes from somewhere else, but the light you've never lost, only hidden beneath layers of fear and expectation. And then one morning you wake up not to trumpets of triumph, but to a soft, gentle stillness. You look around and realize the world hasn't changed, but you have. The old fear is gone. The resistance has melted away. What's left is a quiet gratitude for each breath, each ray of sunlight spilling through the window. That's how you know the dawn has arrived. Not outside of you, but within you. And in that moment you understand the dark night of the soul was never an ending. It was the moment right before your soul finally found itself. So if you are in that darkness now, don't despair. Stay with it. Love it as a natural part of your journey, because sometimes only in the deepest night do we learn how to truly see the light. I want you to imagine this. You're sitting in a room filled with things you've collected over the years. Every photo, every souvenir, every object carries a story about who you've been. And then one day you start to feel suffocated. Not because the room has shrunk, but because there's just too much inside it. So you open the windows, you look around, and for some reason you feel the urge to start clearing things out, not to redecorate, but to breathe again. That's what spiritual awakening feels like. Most people think awakening is about adding knowledge, adding experiences, adding more spiritual insight. But in truth, it's about removing. It's not about becoming higher or better, but about seeing more clearly, and in that clarity, the false naturally falls away. I once met a man named George. He was in his 50s, had read dozens of books on spirituality, meditation, and philosophy. He said to me, I'm trying so hard to reach enlightenment, but the harder I try, the the further away it feels. I meditate, I listen to talks I practice, but it just feels like more weight on my shoulders. I looked at him and said, "George, maybe the question isn't what more can you do, but what can you let go of?" I told him a short story I often share with my students. A young man once asked a Zen master, "Master, what must I do to attain enlightenment?" The master smiled and said, "You don't need to do anything. You just need to stop doing what hides enlightenment. It's like the sun, it was never gone. It's just been covered by clouds." Awakening isn't about bringing more light into the darkness. It's about allowing the darkness to dissolve so that the light already there can shine through. All the things we try to add, new titles, new experiences, new forms of control, only take us further from truth. Because truth doesn't need improvement, it only needs to be seen. Have you ever felt that? That despite all your learning, all your effort to be better, something inside still feels heavy? That might be life's way of whispering you're carrying too much. Sometimes awakening is simply putting down the spiritual baggage we've carried for a lifetime, all the shoulds and musts and shouldn'ts. In modern psychology, they call this process unlearning, the gentle undoing of old mental patterns. As we age, the brain loves familiarity. It clings to routines, beliefs, and identities as a form of safety. But awakening asks us to release that anchor, even for a moment, to realize the ocean never needed one. The ocean is vast, alive, and perfectly capable of holding itself. When I was younger, I thought the spiritual journey was like climbing a great mountain, that at the top, all answers would be waiting. But the higher I climbed, the more exhausted I became, and the mountain never seemed to end. One day, I stopped. I sat down. I looked around, and I realized the mountain was never there. I'd been climbing layers of my own identity, the teacher, the thinker, the one who understood. And as each layer fell away, what remained was simple life itself, unadorned, wordless, complete. A scientist friend of mine once said, "The more I understand the universe, the less I feel the need to add to it. Everything is already perfect in its own way, and I think that's the heart of awakening, not addition, not subtraction, just clarity. When the false falls away, nothing is truly lost, only the unnecessary weight. The people who leave the roles that end, the beliefs that crumble, they're all part of the cleansing. Like a forest fire that seems destructive, but afterward the ground becomes fertile again, ready for new life. Awakening is that fire. It burns away the illusion not to destroy, but to make space for what's real. And the most beautiful part, you don't have to protect what's real. Truth, love, peace, they've never needed defending. They exist naturally, like sunlight or breath. So if your life feels like it's falling apart right now, if everything seems to be slipping away, don't rush to fix it. Maybe this isn't a loss. Maybe it's intelligence at work. The intelligence of life gently helping you loosen your grip on what was never yours. Because at the end of the day, there's only one thing that never falls away, the real you, simple, luminous, and free. Awakening doesn't make you better than others. It simply brings you back to who you've always been. And sometimes, that's the greatest miracle a human being can experience. I want you to imagine this. It's a quiet morning. You open your eyes and realize that something or someone you once held dear is no longer there. Maybe it's a job that once defined you. Maybe it's a person you loved for decades. Or maybe it's a version of yourself you no longer recognize. You sit up and the thought rises almost instinctively, "I've lost everything." I've heard that sentence more times than I can count, and every time I pause for a moment before answering. Then softly I say, "You haven't really lost anything. You've only lost the illusion that you could ever lose, that usually confuses people. So let me explain. Years ago, I met a woman named Clara, 62 years old, freshly divorced after 30 years of marriage. She told me, "I've lost everything, my husband, my home, my children are distant. It feels like even I am disappearing." I looked at her for a long moment and asked Clara what exactly has disappeared. The woman sitting in front of me is still here, breathing, speaking alive. Maybe what's dissolving isn't you, but the image of you that you once believed was real. She blinked in surprise. So I continued, we don't actually fear losing others. We fear losing the version of ourselves that exists with them. The perfect wife, the strong parent, the dependable one. But those versions are just shadows, not the person or self. And when the shadow fades, the real you begins to shine. You see, every loss is an illusion of the ego. The ego, the me we think we are, defines its worth by what it can hold on to. Relationships, titles, possessions, beliefs, memories. So when any of those slip away, the ego panics as if part of itself were dying. But if you look closer, you'll see nothing real can ever be lost, because you never owned it in the first place. Think of a wave on the ocean. It may believe it's dying when it crashes and disappears, but in truth, it's simply returning to what it always was, the sea. And so are you. Everything you think you've lost is just returning to where it belongs. And you, the vast awareness watching it all, remain untouched. Even neuroscience tells us something similar. The human brain reacts to emotional loss in the same region that processes physical pain. It's why heartbreak literally hurts. But as time passes, the brain adjusts. It realizes the body is intact. The person is still alive. The pain doesn't mean something real was destroyed. It means the mind is letting go of its old identity. That's all grief truly is, the ego's resistance to transformation. A friend of mine once told me, every time I lose something, I try to ask myself, who is it that feels the loss? And every time I ask that question, something deep inside me relaxes. It's such a powerful practice, because when you look closely enough, you'll see that the one who's grieving isn't the real you. It's the character in the story, the role you've played. And when that role fades, you discover that the awareness behind it all, the one watching, has never changed. I'm not saying you shouldn't feel sad. The pain is real. The tears are real. But beneath that ache, there's a silence that's never been touched by loss. Just like the sun behind the clouds, it's always there even when hidden. You don't have to bring back the light. You only have to let the clouds drift away. And when that happens, something miraculous occurs. What you once called loss becomes a doorway to presence. You stop seeing life through the lens of me and mine, and instead, you begin to see through the stillness of just being. No more, I lost love. Only love has completed its role. No more, I lost the past. Only a chapter has ended, so a new one can begin. I went through this myself. I lost my father when I was 20. At the time, I was devastated. I thought my life had ended too. But years later, sitting alone in silence, I realized I hadn't lost him. His love wasn't trapped in my memories. It was alive in my breath, in my gentleness, in the quiet way he had taught me to be present. He had never left, only changed form. So if today you feel like everything is slipping away, pause for a moment. Breathe. Ask yourself, what is really being lost? And who is the one that's losing it? You'll find that what's disappearing is only the shadow, not the source. And as the shadow falls away, light fills the room again. You haven't lost anything. You've simply become more whole. Because sometimes it's only by losing what isn't real that we discover we've never truly lacked anything at all. Beautiful. There's a saying I often use when I speak to my students. Spiritual awakening doesn't happen in one great explosion of light. It happens through 1,000 small deaths. And each of those little deaths feels real, because in a way they are. Every time a belief shatters, every time a certainty dissolves, every time a version of yourself fades away, you experience death in miniature. And it hurts. It hurts because the mind doesn't yet know that dying in this way is how the soul learns to live. I remember once talking with a man named Joseph. He was in his late 50s, a retired engineer, logical, intelligent, calm. But when his mother passed away, he told me, something deeper than grief is happening. I don't just feel like I lost my mother. I feel like I lost who I was when she was alive. I nodded and said, That's not strange at all. Every loss you face is asking for a small death, the death of an identity, the end of a story you once told about who you were. That's what awakening does. It doesn't destroy you. It quietly removes everything you're not. Every illusion, every attachment, every layer that was never truly, you get stripped away. And yes, it feels like death, because for the ego it is. But the soul knows something the ego doesn't. Each death opens a little more space for life to enter. I often tell people, don't fight these small deaths. The end of a friendship, the loss of a dream, the fading of an ambition, they're not punishments. They're transformations. Nature itself teaches this truth every season. The trees don't mourn their leaves in autumn. They let them fall, trusting that new life will come again. The caterpillar doesn't resist the cocoon, even though to its old self it feels like the end. That stillness, that darkness, it's what allows the butterfly to exist. You see, our culture fears endings. We call them failures, breakdowns, tragedies. But spiritually speaking, every ending is an act of grace. It's how life reclaims what no longer serves you. It's how love clears the ground for truth to grow. I once went through a period in my own life when everything seemed to collapse. Career, relationships, health. For a while I thought I was being punished by the universe. But then I began to notice something subtle with each loss. Something false was dying. And in its place, something vast and quiet was appearing. The need to control died. The need to be right died. The need to prove myself died. And every time something died, I felt lighter, freer, more alive. That's the paradox of awakening. It's not about gaining wisdom, but about losing the illusions that keep you from seeing what's always been here. It's death that makes room for truth. And when you stop resisting those little deaths, they stop feeling like tragedies. They begin to feel like blessings. There's a point in this process when you start to understand, I don't need to keep rebuilding the old version of me. You realize there's no going back to who you were, and that's not a loss. It's liberation. You don't need to hold on to old ideas about how life should be. You don't need to preserve outdated versions of yourself to stay safe. The person you thought you were is constantly dying, and something new, something more authentic is quietly taking its place. And here's the miracle. After enough of these small deaths, something extraordinary happens. You stop being afraid of death itself, not because you've conquered it, but because you've seen that what dies was never who you truly are. The you that comes and goes, the personality, the memories, the story, those are the clouds. But the sky behind them, it never changes. And once you know yourself as that sky, you welcome the clouds when they come, and you let them go when they pass. So the next time life asks you to let something go, a plan, a role, a certainty, don't resist. Breathe, trust, allow the little death to happen, because with every surrender, the soul breathes a little easier. Awakening doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with quiet funerals for every false thing you ever believed. And after 1,000 of them, one day you wake up and realize that what remains is simple, clear, and utterly alive. You've been reborn not into someone new, but into what you've been all along. There comes a point on the spiritual path when everything seems to stop. The old ambitions don't move you anymore. The books that once inspired you now feel like empty words. Even meditation feels dry, and so you sit there in the silence of your own being and whisper to yourself, I've lost everything. Even God seems gone. If you've ever felt that way, I want to tell you this truth from my own experience. The emptiness you're feeling is not empty. When the ego looks into silence, it sees a void. It calls it nothing. But to the soul, that nothing is the beginning of everything. I remember once speaking with a woman named Sarah. She had spent years on the spiritual path, retreats, meditation study. And then one day she said, I feel completely numb. Nothing excites me. I can't even cry anymore. She thought she was broken. But I told her, Sarah, maybe you're not broken. Maybe what's dying is the noise. You see, the mind cannot recognize stillness. It only recognizes movement. So when stillness comes, the mind panics. It says, something's wrong. I'm losing myself, but the self that feels lost is precisely what needed to dissolve. I want you to imagine this. You've been standing beside a loud waterfall your entire life. Its sound has been constant, the sound of your thoughts, your fears, your stories. Then one day the waterfall stops. At first, the silence feels terrifying. You think something's gone terribly wrong, but stay there long enough, and you start to hear something else, the subtle hum of life itself. That's what happens in awakening. When all the distractions fall away, what's left isn't nothingness. It's pure presence. Not the absence of life, but the presence of life without commentary. The mind calls it emptiness. The heart calls it home. I know this sounds poetic, but even science supports it. Neuroscientists have discovered that when the brain's default mode network, the area responsible for self-referential thinking, quiets down. People report feelings of vastness, timelessness, and deep peace. They often say, "I felt like I disappeared, but somehow I've never been more alive." That's the paradox. When the false self falls silent, life speaks not through thought, but through being. I've seen this happen again and again in people over 50. For decades, they've built identities as parents, workers, caregivers, achievers. Then one day, the roles start to fade. Retirement comes, children leave, titles disappear, and they look around and say, "Who am I now?" What they don't realize is that this question isn't the end, it's the doorway. Because when all the roles dissolve, what remains is what was always there, awareness itself. There's a beauty in that kind of stillness. It's not dramatic, it doesn't sparkle, but it's profound because it's real. You no longer chase meaning. Meaning quietly reveals itself. You no longer search for love. Love becomes the natural fragrance of your presence. A dear friend once told me, when I finally stopped trying to fill the emptiness, I discovered it was full of peace, full of aliveness, full of God. That stayed with me. Because that's what awakening truly is, realizing the void isn't void at all. When the mind gives up, when you stop running, when you stop fighting, what is you begin to sense a deep pulse beneath everything. That pulse is life itself. It doesn't belong to you, and yet it is you. It's the same life that breathes through the trees, that moves the tides, that beats the heart of the stars. So if you ever find yourself in that silence, don't rush to fill it. Don't go looking for a new project, a new belief, or even a new spiritual practice to escape it. Just sit quietly and let it unfold. Because in that stillness, something magnificent is happening. You are being reborn, not as someone new, but as the space that allows all things to be. The emptiness isn't a punishment, it's an invitation. It's how life says, "Come home." And when you accept that invitation, you realize the void you feared was never empty. It was full of love, full of awareness, full of you. You cannot awaken by will. That's one of the hardest truths for the mind to accept, because the mind is built to do, to achieve, to fix. It believes that if it just tries harder, practices longer, studies deeper, it will finally arrive. But awakening isn't something you can arrive at, because there's no you to get there. I've met countless seekers who have spent decades chasing enlightenment like it's a marathon. They meditate for hours, read scriptures, attend every workshop, and yet the more they try to get it, the further it seems to slip away. They ask me, why can't I awaken? What am I doing wrong? And I always tell them the same thing. You can't force yourself to dissolve. The one who's trying so hard to wake up is the very illusion that needs to disappear. It's like trying to lift yourself by your own shadow. No matter how much effort you make, the you that's striving is still part of the dream. I remember one evening talking with an old friend, a Zen monk who had been meditating for more than 30 years. He told me, when I was young, I thought enlightenment was something I could win like a prize. But the more I sat, the more the one who wanted enlightenment began to fade. And then one morning while sweeping the courtyard, I realized there was no one left to be enlightened. That's the mystery of it. The moment you stop trying to become awake, awakening reveals itself. Not because you've earned it, but because it was always there, quietly waiting behind all your effort. Think of it this way: when you stir muddy water, it stays cloudy. But when you stop stirring and let it rest, the mud settles and the water becomes clear on its own. Clarity doesn't come from control, it comes from stillness. That's why every true teaching points not to more effort but to seeing. Just seeing without judging, without manipulating, without trying to get somewhere else. When awareness turns inward, when it observes the play of thought and emotion, without getting caught, the illusion begins to lose its power. You start to see the game. You see the ego's endless disguises, the seeker, the teacher, the spiritual person. You see how it keeps trying to use spirituality as a new costume for control. And when you see that clearly, something beautiful happens. You laugh, because you realize the joke the ego has been chasing its own tail all along. That laughter is not mockery, it's freedom. Because in that moment of seeing, the effort dissolves, not through suppression, not through denial, but through understanding. A flower doesn't bloom by forcing itself open. It opens when the conditions are right. Sunlight, water, soil, patience. Your awakening is no different. When the noise of striving quiets down, when the desire to arrive falls away, your true nature unfolds naturally. I often say to those who come to me in frustration, don't try to wake up. Just stop pretending you're asleep. Because what you truly are has never been asleep. It's been here the entire time, silently aware of your effort, your longing, your struggle. So instead of asking, how can I awaken? Ask, who is the one trying to awaken? Stay with that question. Don't answer it with words. Let it echo in your heart. Eventually, the seeker itself fades away and only awareness remains. And when that happens, you'll realize something quietly miraculous. Awakening isn't an achievement. It's a homecoming. It's the end of the struggle to become someone and the beginning of resting as what you already are. Life after awakening doesn't disappear. It simply becomes lighter. You still wake up in the morning. You still drink your coffee, answer calls, talk to friends. You still laugh, love, and sometimes cry. But something invisible has shifted. The weight that once pressed against your chest, that tight sense of, I must, I have to, is gone. For most of our lives, we've been taught that life is a battlefield. You must fight to be somebody, to prove your worth, to earn love, to secure happiness. We chase meaning the way a child chases butterflies, always just one step away. But when awakening comes, the chasing ends. Not because you've caught the butterfly, but because you realize it was never separate from you. I've seen this countless times in people in their 60s and 70s. They tell me, I still love my family. I still care about my work. But it all feels different now, lighter, easier. Things matter, but they don't weigh me down anymore. One man, Robert, once said, it's strange. I still plan my days, but I no longer feel like I'm steering the ship. Life seems to move itself, and I just follow. He smiled, and I could see the peace in his eyes, the kind that no achievement can buy. You see, awakening doesn't remove you from the world. It removes the prison of fear you used to live in. You stop being trapped in the anxiety of outcomes. You still care deeply, but you no longer cling desperately. Before awakening, every action is heavy because it's loaded with me. I must succeed. I must be loved. I must not fail. After awakening, the me is gone. The doing remains, but now it's effortless, almost playful. It's like playing music after years of practice. At first, you struggle to hit the notes. Then one day, the hands move by themselves and music flows without effort. That's how life feels when the doer dissolves. It plays through you. Even love changes its quality. Before awakening, love is often mixed with fear of loss, of rejection, of impermanence. After awakening, love becomes like sunlight. It shines simply because that's what it does. It doesn't ask to be returned. It doesn't need to last forever. It just is. You begin to see that joy doesn't come from getting things right. It comes from being fully present even when things fall apart. I often use the metaphor of a dance. Before awakening, you dance to impress. You worry about how you look, whether others approve, whether you're moving in rhythm. After awakening, you dance because the music is playing. You don't need a reason. You move because life moves. That's what it means to play life instead of being played by it. Even your relationship with suffering transforms. Pain still visits you, but without resistance, it doesn't linger. It flows through like rain passing through open air. You realize that joy and sorrow are not enemies. They're both movements of the same vast scheme. There's a beautiful calm that arises when you stop demanding that life be any different from what it is. You may still work, still love, still struggle, but everything happens within a deep acceptance. And in that acceptance, something magical happens. You start to notice beauty in small, ordinary things, the way sunlight touches the floor, the sound of wind through leaves, the simple act of breathing. Every moment becomes complete. That's why awakening isn't the end of life. It's the beginning of real life. Not the one driven by fear or ambition, but the one lived from the quiet joy of being. And maybe that's the ultimate freedom, not escaping the world, but moving through it with a light heart, unburdened by the constant demand to become someone. You don't stop living. You start living differently, not as a seeker or a survivor, but as life itself, awake, spontaneous, and free. Life after awakening doesn't disappear. It simply becomes lighter. You still wake up in the morning. You still drink your coffee, answer calls, talk to friends. You still laugh, love, and sometimes cry, but something invisible has shifted. The weight that once pressed against your chest, that tight sense of I must, I have to, is gone. For most of our lives, we've been taught that life is a battlefield. You must fight to be somebody, to prove your worth, to earn love, to secure happiness. We chase meaning the way a child chases butterflies, always just one step away. But when awakening comes, the chasing ends. Not because you've caught the butterfly, but because you realize it was never separate from you. I've seen this countless times in people in their 60s and 70s. They tell me, I still love my family, I still care about my work, but it all feels different now, lighter, easier. Things matter, but they don't weigh me down anymore. One man, Robert, once said, "It's strange. I still plan my days, but I no longer feel like I'm steering the ship. Life seems to move itself, and I just follow." He smiled, and I could see the peace in his eyes, the kind that no achievement can buy. You see, awakening doesn't remove you from the world. It removes the prison of fear you used to live in. You stop being trapped in the anxiety of outcomes. You still care deeply, but you no longer cling desperately. Before awakening, every action is heavy because it's loaded with me. I must succeed. I must be loved. I must not fail. After awakening, the me is gone. The doing remains, but now it's effortless, almost playful. It's like playing music after years of practice. At first, you struggle to hit the notes. Then one day, the hands move by themselves and music flows without effort. That's how life feels when the doer dissolves. It plays through you. Even love changes its quality. Before awakening, love is often mixed with fear. Fear of loss, of rejection, of impermanence. After awakening, love becomes like sunlight. It shines simply because that's what it does. It doesn't ask to be returned. It doesn't need to last forever. It just is. You begin to see that joy doesn't come from getting things right. It comes from being fully present, even when things fall apart. I often use the metaphor of a dance. Before awakening, you dance to impress. You worry about how you look, whether others approve, whether you're moving in rhythm. After awakening, you dance because the music is playing. You don't need a reason. You move because life moves. That's what it means to play life instead of being played by it. Even your relationship with suffering transforms. Pain still visits you, but without resistance, it doesn't linger. It flows through like rain passing through open air. You realize that joy and sorrow are not enemies. They're both movements of the same vast sky. There's a beautiful calm that arises when you stop demanding that life be any different from what it is. You may still work, still love, still struggle, but everything happens within a deep acceptance. And in that acceptance, something magical happens. You start to notice beauty in small, ordinary things, the way sunlight touches the floor, the sound of wind through leaves, the simple act of breathing. every moment becomes complete. That's why awakening isn't the end of life. It's the beginning of real life. Not the one driven by fear or ambition, but the one lived from the quiet joy of being. And maybe that's the ultimate freedom, not escaping the world, but moving through it with a light heart, unburdened by the constant demand to become someone. You don't stop living. You start living differently, not as a seeker or a survivor, but as life itself, awake, spontaneous, and free. The I you think you are is just a character in a film. I know that sounds strange, maybe even unsettling, but stay with me for a moment. Imagine sitting in a dark theater, completely absorbed in a movie. You laugh, you cry, you feel your heart race when the hero is in danger. For those 2 hours, you forget it's just a film, you are the character. Then when the credits roll and the lights come up, you blink, stretch, and remember it was all a story. Nothing real was ever lost or won. That's what awakening reveals. Life continues. The story unfolds. You still have a role to play. A parent, a friend, a creator, a teacher. But now you watch it all with open eyes. You realize, I'm not the character. I'm the screen upon which the movie is playing. I once spoke with a man named David. He was 71 and had spent his whole life working in finance. One afternoon, he told me, it feels like my whole life has been a movie I forgot I was watching. Every time the stock market rose, I was the hero. Every time it fell, I was the victim. But now it's like I'm sitting in the audience, still watching, but at peace with whatever happens on the screen. He laughed softly and said, it's strange, but even the painful scenes have their beauty. That's the wisdom of awakening, not that the story stops, but that you see it for what it is. The mind has spent a lifetime identifying with this me, the protagonist who must win, survive, achieve. But when you step back and truly see, you notice the story moving on its own. The thoughts arise, emotions flow, actions happen, and yet there's something quiet, untouched, watching it all unfold. That awareness is who you truly are. It doesn't come and go with the plot. It isn't born when the movie starts, and it doesn't die when the credits roll. It's there before the first frame, during every scene, and long after the story fades to black. I often ask people, have you ever noticed that even when your thoughts are racing, there's still something calm behind them, observing that stillness isn't a part of the movie, it's the screen itself? Even science has started to glimpse this truth. Neuroscientists studying consciousness describe awareness as the constant background state that remains even when our sense of identity shifts or dissolves. In moments of deep meditation, brain scans show that the regions responsible for self-referencing go quiet, while the networks of pure perception remain active. In those moments, you're no longer the character, you're the awareness witnessing the story of you. It's not that life becomes dull or meaningless. On the contrary, it becomes richer. Because now you can truly watch it without fear. You laugh at the comedy, you cry at the tragedy. But deep down, you know it's all part of the same magnificent play. The ancient sages described it beautifully. They said, you are not in the universe. You are the universe expressing itself for a while as this person in this story. That realization doesn't make you cold or detached. It makes you more compassionate, more alive. Because you begin to see every other person as a fellow actor in this same divine movie. When someone hurts you, you understand they're just playing their role, just as you've played yours. When someone loves you, you cherish it, knowing it's the universe recognizing itself in another form. And when something ends a relationship, a dream, even a lifetime, you no longer panic. Because you know the screen is untouched. The movie ends, yes, but the awareness remains. Always. So if you ever find yourself clinging too tightly to your story, pause. Take a breath. Look around not as the character, but as the witness. Notice how life keeps moving on its own, how every joy and sorrow arises and fades like scenes in a film. And remember, you don't need to stop the movie. You just need to wake up inside it. Because once you know yourself as the screen, you can finally sit back, watch the story unfold, and whisper with a smile, "Beautiful film this life is." The dark night of the soul doesn't destroy you, it frees you. I know it doesn't feel that way when you're in it. When everything you once depended on starts to crumble, it can feel like the universe has turned its back on you. Your beliefs collapse, your sense of identity dissolves, your confidence vanishes. You wake up one morning and realize the person you used to be no longer exists. And in those moments, the mind screams, "I'm falling apart." But what if I told you you're not the one that's falling apart? What's crumbling is the story you built around yourself. The real you, the awareness behind it all remains untouched. Think of the sky on a stormy day. The clouds roll in thick and dark thunder echoing across the horizon. For hours, the world feels heavy, suffocating. But above those clouds, the sky hasn't changed. It's still vast, open, blue, endless. When the storm passes, the sky doesn't celebrate victory. It simply is. That's who you are. You're not the storm. You're not the clouds of fear, grief, or confusion. You're the sky that holds them all. I once spoke with a woman named Helen who went through a long period of what she called her dark night. She lost her partner, her career, and even her faith. She said to me, "It feels like I'm dying." And I said, "You are. But not in the way you think." The person who needed all those things to feel whole, that person is dying. What's left is what's always been true. At first, she didn't understand, but months later, she returned with a softness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. She said, "You were right. Nothing was destroyed. I just stopped fighting what was changing." That's the quiet miracle of the dark night. It strips you of every illusion of control until all that's left is the simple truth you were never the one in control. And instead of despair, that realization brings peace. The mystics have spoken of this for centuries. St. John of the Cross called it the dark night of the soul. The Buddhists call it the dissolution of the self. Modern psychology might call it ego death. Different names, same essence, the moment when what is false falls away, revealing what's eternal. And yes, it's painful. The ego will fight for its survival. It will resist, bargain, cling to every idea of who it thinks you are. But as the walls fall, something extraordinary begins to happen. Beneath all that noise, you start to feel something deeper, not fear, but spaciousness. A quiet presence that doesn't come or go. When you realize that presence is who you truly are, the suffering begins to soften, because you see that nothing real can ever be destroyed. The storm passes, the clouds dissolve, and the sky, the vastness of your being, remains untouched. I've often said to people, don't be afraid of breaking down. Be afraid of never breaking open, because only through the cracks does the light get in. The dark night doesn't come to punish you. It comes to purify you. It takes away everything you are, not so that you can remember what you are. And what you are is not fragile, not temporary, not small. When you stop identifying with the one who's suffering, you see you were never the one falling apart. You were always the awareness watching the pieces rearrange themselves. So if your life feels like it's collapsing right now, if everything you once trusted is slipping away, don't rush to rebuild. Let it fall, let it burn, let it all unravel, because what's falling away isn't you, and what's left when it's all gone, that stillness, that vastness, that unshakable peace, that's what you've been looking for all along. You are the sky, not the cloud. And the sky never breaks. It simply watches the weather pass through, knowing that no storm lasts forever. Awakening is the end of feeling separate. It's not a belief or a mystical theory or some poetic ideal. It's an experience so simple, so natural, that the mind almost misses it, because the mind was built on separation. It says, this is me and that is the world. This is my body and that's nature. This is my thought and that's your thought. But one day when the noise quiets, something begins to dissolve. The walls that you've spent a lifetime building between you and everything else start to crumble. And in that silence, you see the truth that has always been there. You were never a part of the universe. You were the universe all along. I've spoken to many people in their 50s and 60s who have felt this shift. They say things like, I was walking by the ocean and suddenly I couldn't tell where I ended and the waves began. Or I looked into my grandchild's eyes, and for a moment, I wasn't the grandfather I was, life itself looking back at me. That's not imagination, that's recognition. The recognition that everything you've ever experienced has happened within you, not to you, not outside you, but as you. I remember an old man named Richard who told me something that has stayed with me for years. He said I spent my whole life praying to God as if he were somewhere else. But now when I pray, I don't say anything. I just listen, because I finally realized God was the silence I was praying into. That's what awakening reveals. It's not that you disappear, it's that the boundaries you believed in dissolve, and you finally experience reality without filters. It's what the ancient Hindus meant when they said, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that, and what the mystics meant when they spoke of union with the divine. You don't merge with something new, you remember that you were never apart. Science too hints at this truth in its own language. Quantum physicists tell us that every atom in your body once belonged to the stars. The oxygen you breathe is shared by every living thing on this planet. The heartbeat you feel isn't separate from the rhythm of the earth itself. From the level of physics to the level of consciousness, separation is an illusion, a useful one for survival, but an illusion nonetheless. And yet when that illusion fades, you don't become detached or indifferent. Quite the opposite. You become more connected, more tender, more alive. Because when you see yourself in everything, how could you ever harm anything again? I once sat with a woman who had just come through a long depression. She said, one morning I was washing dishes and I looked at the water running over my hands. And suddenly I started crying, not from sadness, but because I realized that the water, the soap, the movement, even the act of noticing it was all the same thing. It was all life. And somehow I was part of it. That's what happens when the illusion of separation ends. The simplest acts become sacred again. You don't need to chase enlightenment anymore because you see that enlightenment was never somewhere else. It's in the way the wind touches your skin, in the sound of laughter, in the quiet awareness that holds every moment. You stop asking, where do I belong? Because you realize you've never been outside of belonging. When you drop the idea that you are just a small, fragile being trying to survive in a vast universe, you begin to sense something immeasurable breathing through you. And in that moment, you don't need to understand it. You just know. It's not knowledge, it's intimacy. You feel it in your bones. There is no you and life. There is only life seeing itself through these eyes, hearing through these ears, loving through this heart. And from that recognition, compassion naturally flows. Because how could you hate another when you know there is no other? How could you fear what you already are? This is the quiet revolution of awakening, not the fireworks of enlightenment, but the soft dissolving of distance. No grand event, no divine thunderclap, just the slow, gentle realization that the wave was never separate from the ocean. You don't become infinite. You simply stop pretending you were ever anything less. Don't be afraid of losing, because what remains is eternal. I know how deeply the human heart fears loss. We spend our whole lives trying to protect what we love, our family, our beliefs, our memories, even our sense of self. And yet everything we try to hold eventually slips through our fingers. The body ages, relationships change, the people we cherish pass away, and all the things we thought defined us slowly fade. It's one of life's greatest paradoxes. The more we cling, the more fragile everything feels. But here's the truth, that awakening reveals what's real can never be lost. The you that comes and goes, the one you identify with that isn't the real you. It's like a wave believing it's separate from the ocean. When the wave crashes, it thinks it's died, but the ocean remains untouched alive. That ocean, that vast, unchanging awareness, is what you truly are. I remember speaking with a man named Peter who had just lost his wife after 40 years of marriage. His grief was heavy, and yet there was a strange light in his eyes. He said, "For months I cried every day, but one morning I woke up and the pain felt different. It wasn't sharp anymore. It was like the love was still here, but without a name, without a face. I could feel her everywhere, And I told him that's because love was never between two people. It was what you both were made of all along. You see, what dies is form. What remains is essence. Every ending you've ever experienced was just life changing its shape. The people you've loved aren't gone. They've simply returned to the same vastness you came from. And if you sit quietly, if you let your heart open even in pain, you can feel it. That still presence, that silent awareness that holds all of life and death together. Spiritual awakening isn't about becoming fearless. It's about seeing that the only thing that can truly die is the illusion of separation. Once that illusion fades, loss no longer feels like destruction. It feels like transformation. The Buddhists call it anicca impermanence. Everything born must pass. But they also say that beneath impermanence lies nibbana, the unconditioned, the eternal. You don't need to believe in heaven or reincarnation to understand it. Just look around. Every leaf that falls nourishes the soil. Every sunset gives way to dawn. Every breath you exhale returns to the air that sustains all life. So when something leaves your life, trust that it's not the end. It's a continuation, one form dissolving into another. Even modern physics whispers the same secret energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. And consciousness, the awareness that knows this, is the most fundamental energy there is. When you begin to see that a quiet courage awakens in you, you no longer fight to hold on. You begin to relax into life's natural rhythm, the coming and the going, the birth and the death, the expansion and the return. And you realize that behind all of it, something vast and still has never moved. That's the real you. The one that was never born and will never die. The one that has watched every version of you come and go, the child, the dreamer, the lover, the seeker, and has remained untouched through it all. When you know yourself as that, loss no longer terrifies you. You stop asking, how do I protect myself from pain? And instead ask, how can I love fully knowing everything changes? And the answer is simple. You love because love is what you are. You give not to possess, but to express. You let go, not because you're indifferent, but because you trust that nothing real can ever leave you. The seeker disappears in this understanding, because what you've been seeking, peace, freedom, home, was never hidden. It was only obscured by the one who is searching. When that illusion dissolves, what's left is everything you've ever longed for. So don't be afraid of losing. Every loss is an unveiling. Every ending is a doorway. And what stands on the other side of that doorway isn't death. It's life, pure and eternal, looking back at itself through your eyes. Loss is the soul's initiation, its sacred rite of birth. In many ancient traditions, they called it the spiritual death. But that phrase is misleading because it isn't death in the way we think of it. It's the death of illusion, the death of false identity, the death of the small, frightened self that believes it must hold the world together. And as that self dies, something miraculous is born, a soul that no longer fears loss because it finally understands that nothing real can ever be taken away. I remember a woman named Margaret, a retired teacher in her 60s, who came to me after losing her only son in an accident. Her grief was beyond words. She said, "I don't know who I am anymore. The person I used to be died with him." And I told her gently, yes, and maybe that's not the end of your story. Maybe that's the beginning of your soul's. You see, in many cultures, loss isn't seen as punishment. It's seen as initiation, the moment when the soul is stripped bare so it can begin to live authentically. The mystics knew this long ago. In the Sufi path, they speak of fana, the annihilation of the false self. In Christianity, it's called the dark night before resurrection. And in Buddhism, it's the moment when the clinging mind finally lets go and discovers that life was never separate from itself. The soul doesn't awaken through comfort, it awakens through surrender. And surrender almost always feels like loss. When the ego is broken open, the soul steps forward. When everything you thought you were is taken from you, what remains is what you truly are. The shell cracks not to destroy the seed, but to allow it to grow. Margaret came back to see me a year later. She was still grieving, but something had changed. Her eyes were softer, clearer. She said, "The pain is still there, but it no longer owns me. When I walk outside, I feel him in the wind, in the sunlight, in the quiet. He's not gone. He's everywhere." That's the transformation of the soul. It doesn't remove the pain. It widens the heart so much that the pain and love can exist together side by side. I've seen it happen again and again. A man loses his career and discovers his purpose. A woman's marriage ends and she finally meets her own strength. An illness comes and shatters all certainty, only to reveal a peace that doesn't depend on the body's condition. Loss is never random. It's how life clears away what no longer serves your becoming. It's how the soul is born, naked, honest, real. There's an old Native American saying, "The world cracks us open not to destroy us, but so the light can get in." And that light doesn't enter gently. It enters through pain, through surrender, through every moment when you whisper, "I can't do this anymore." And something greater inside you quietly replies, "You don't have to let go." Spiritual death isn't the end of your story. It's the moment your real story begins. Because when everything false has burned away, when the masks fall, when the striving stops, what's left is raw presence, unguarded and free. The person who feared loss dies. The soul that knows unity is born. And from that moment on, you don't just believe in eternity, you feel it. You live from it. You recognize it in the laughter of a stranger, in the silence after tears, in the pulse of life that keeps beating, even when your world seems to stop. That's what awakening truly is. The birth that follows the death. Not the death of life, but the death of illusion. Not the loss of the world, but the rediscovery of what was always holding it. And once the soul has passed through that fire, it can never go back to sleep, because it now knows everything that ends is only life-changing form. And everything real, everything sacred, everything that matters was never lost at all. Imagine this. It's late afternoon. You're sitting quietly on your porch. No phone, no TV. No plans, just you, the gentle hum of life around you, the breeze through the trees, the shifting light on the ground, the slow rhythm of your own breath. At first, your mind protests. It wants to move, to think, to fix something. It whispers, "You should be doing something. There's a problem to solve, someone to call, something to become." But if you just stay still long enough for the noise to lose interest, a strange thing begins to happen. Beneath the restless chatter, a vast silence reveals itself. It isn't empty. It's full, quietly, deeply full. It holds everything: the sound of the wind, the beating of your heart, even the thoughts that rise and fall. This silence doesn't reject anything. It embraces all. And you begin to sense that this, not your accomplishments, not your roles, not even your thoughts, is what you've been searching for your whole life. This is the language of silence. I once worked with a man named James, a retired philosophy professor. His whole life was about words, logic, and meaning. When he began to meditate, he said, "It feels useless. My mind just keeps running." I told him, "Good, let it run until it runs out." Months later, he came back to me, eyes wide with wonder. He said, "I finally understand something I'd read 1,000 times, but never felt: that silence isn't the absence of meaning. It's the source of it." You see, awakening doesn't end with some cosmic revelation. It ends in this, a deep, wordless knowing that everything is already whole. You stop chasing explanations. You stop needing to define or defend anything. The truth no longer needs to be spoken because it's seen. I used to believe that wisdom lived in sacred texts, complex philosophies, or great teachers. Now I know it lives in the pause between thoughts and the breath between words, in the space that holds both joy and pain without resistance. The Taoists knew this long ago. Lao Tzu said, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, because the moment you try to describe truth, it slips through your grasp, not because it's hiding, but because it's too alive to be captured." Science too hints at this mystery. Neuroscientists have found that in deep meditation or creative flow, the regions of the brain responsible for language and self-reference go quiet. The analytical mind turns off. And yet awareness doesn't vanish, it expands. In that state, you don't think about life. You are life. The painter becomes the painting. The musician becomes the music. The breath breathes itself. That's what happens when you stop trying to understand and simply allow yourself to be. One evening, while walking through the forest near my home, I stopped and listened. There were no profound thoughts, no inner dialogue, just sound, space, and presence. The rustle of leaves wasn't out there, and the quiet observer wasn't in here. There was no division, only aliveness. And in that moment, I understood what all the sages meant, not through words, but through being. Silence isn't the opposite of sound, it's the ground of it. It's what allows everything else to exist. And when the mind grows quiet enough, you realize that this silence isn't around you, it is you. You don't find peace by running from the noise of life. You find it by listening so deeply that the noise turns into music. So when your mind feels crowded with questions, when you crave meaning, purpose, direction, don't rush to fill the emptiness. Sit with it. Breathe into it. Let it speak in its own language. Because in that stillness, before thought arises, before emotion takes shape, there is something that has never changed. It was here before you were born, and it will remain long after your final breath. It doesn't need a name, it doesn't need belief, it doesn't need understanding. It only needs your silence. And when you offer it, that you realize the silence was never waiting for you to find it. It was you waiting for yourself to finally be still enough to hear it. I want you to imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a vast cliff. Behind you lies everything you've ever known, your beliefs, your identity, your stories, the people who told you who you are. Ahead of you is only open space, infinite, quiet, unknowable. A small voice inside whispers, "If I step forward, I'll lose everything." And another voice, softer, deeper, older, says, "Yes. And when you lose everything, you'll finally find what's real. That, my friend, is the threshold of awakening." And I'll tell you the truth. Awakening is not for the faint of heart, because it doesn't hand you peace wrapped in comfort. It strips you bare. It takes away the false certainties, the spiritual masks, the comforting ideas of who you think you are. It asks you to walk through fire, not to be burned, but to be purified. I've met many people who said they wanted to awaken, but what most really wanted was a more pleasant dream, less suffering, more meaning, a little more light in the same old story. Awakening doesn't work that way. It's not an upgrade, it's a demolition. It tears down everything that isn't true, including the idea that you could control when or how it happens. I remember a man named Michael, a pastor for over 30 years. His faith had been the foundation of his entire life. Then one day his wife, his closest companion, passed away suddenly. He told me I prayed, I begged God to answer. But for the first time in my life, there was only silence. My faith collapsed. Everything I believed in felt like dust. I asked him, "And what remained after everything fell away?" He paused, then whispered, "Something I can't describe. Not God above me, not God outside me, but something vast and alive within me, as if life itself was breathing me." He looked at me, tears in his eyes, and said, "I think that silence was the answer." That's what real awakening does, is it doesn't add anything new. It removes everything that's in the way of what's already here. Even your most sacred beliefs must sometimes burn so that truth, the living, breathing, wordless truth, can reveal itself. You see, the ego doesn't mind spiritual talk. It loves meditation. It loves the idea of enlightenment as long as it gets to survive the journey. It wants to be the one who awakens. But awakening means seeing that the one who wants enlightenment is the very thing that must dissolve. It's terrifying at first. To let go of every definition, every story, every concept of me. To look into the unknown and not turn away. But if you stay long enough in that raw openness, something extraordinary happens. You discover that you haven't fallen into emptiness, you've fallen into infinity. And it's gentle. It doesn't demand anything from you. It simply holds you. like the ocean holds a wave that's finally stopped fighting the tide. Modern neuroscience has a term for what happens in these moments: ego dissolution. The parts of the brain that create the sense of I, me, mine go quiet. And when they do, people report a profound sense of unity, peace, and expansion, not as a belief, but as direct experience. They no longer feel in life, they feel as life itself. That's the paradox of awakening. It takes immense courage to surrender. But once you do, you realize there was never anything to fear. Because what dies isn't you. It's the illusion that you were ever separate, and what's revealed is not something new, but something ancient and eternal. The truth that you are not a part of the universe, you are the universe aware of itself. So yes, awakening is not for the faint of heart. It demands everything, every falsehood, every attachment, every story you cling to for safety. But in exchange, it gives you the one thing that can never be lost: freedom. Not the freedom to control life, but the freedom from needing to. Not the freedom to become someone special, but the freedom to see that you are everything already. The ski, the stars, the silence, the witness, the love behind all things. When all that's false falls away, what remains is truth itself. And in that truth, you realize you never had to jump. You were never standing on a cliff. You were the sky all along.